Welcome back to episode 83 of Warrior's Den. On this episode, we have Ron Rotem. That name may not sound familiar to you if you are not in Israel, but Ron is well known in the Israeli Krav Maga community. But before I get into that, this podcast is brought to you by Urban Tactics Krav Maga, turning lambs into lions since 2013. We specialize in Krav Maga self-defense, general martial arts, and of course, critical thinking and more. Did you know we have a blog where you can hear some more coherent, well thought out ramblings of me and some of my students or instructors at UTKMblog.com. You can also find various ideas and principles that we teach. Now, if you like this podcast, you can support us in many ways. You can follow us on Instagram at Urban Tactics Krav Maga. You can follow us on Twitter, Urban Tactics KM, though mostly it's reposts of everything else, and of course, Facebook, Urban Tactics Krav Maga. You can also go to that blog again, UTKMblog.com, and click on the Support Us tab at the top if you'd like to donate to us to help further our cause of giving you information or my rantings, whichever you prefer, whatever it is you like. I don't know. No one ever tells me. We'll find out one day. You can go to that page and donate whatever you'd like. Or if you want something a little more tangible for your money, you can go to UTKMU.com and you can see the curriculum as we teach it. Right now, it's only beginner and novice curriculum, as I'm running around doing all sorts of stuff to survive, as is the world in COVID, as a martial arts instructor. So if you want to see more content or me focus on that, I need to see that people want to see it. Otherwise, it's just for my students to check before they test. Just the saying, if you have a test, you should be checking out the curriculum to make sure you have all the finer points. That's UTKMU.com. It's nothing special or mind-blowing other than how I present the information. So whether it's just to supplement your current Krav Maga training or to get a different idea of how curriculum can be presented or what techniques that I'm teaching, you can just check it out, UTKMU.com. You can sign up for a month or longer. It's totally up to you. And there is some free content, though it is limited, such as your PAL information. If you're not in Canada, the PAL is your firearms license. So there is some videos to help you prepare for your PAL course, whether you're taking it with me or not, which brings me to my next thing. If you want to do your firearms licensing course with us, you can go to our regular local website, which is for Metro Vancouver, www.urbantacticskm.com. And if I didn't mention, that's where you can sign up for our classes, because as of a couple days, we can start doing them regularly, and you can sign up. But so if you go urbantacticskm.com and click on the CFSC/CRFSC, I might change that to PAL because it's easier, whatever, and you can sign up for our PAL courses. The firearms licensing is required if you're a student of mine in Canada and want to do the advanced curriculum, or if you want to have firearms in Canada, because they are allowed in Canada, despite what Americans think and the media seems to keep telling people. At the very least, if you just want to get educated on Canadian firearms laws and they turn out to not be what you thought they were, because we are not somewhere else in the world, you can educate yourself, plus learn basic safe firearms handling. So you can do that, and of course sign up for our classes at urbantacticskm.com, new student page, which should be opened up soon to you, so you can sign up without having to go on the wait list. Yay, we're getting over those COVID nonsense. What else? Ooh, a shameless plug. If you want to see my less serious, less philosophical, less existential / Krav Maga personality, I have launched a new YouTube channel with my partner called Joe and John Do Stuff. That is another way you can support us. That may be a bit more entertaining for some of you that are into the YouTube. It's basically us doing stuff from DIY, renovations, cooking, whatever, because we're jack of all trades and we get bored and do stuff. That's kind of the general idea. So if you need something a little different and you still like me, if I haven't pissed you off yet, you can go to Joe and John Do Stuff on YouTube. Much appreciated. Okay, back to Ron Rotem. So, Ron is an admin on the Facebook page Krav Maga History and Culture, which has over 10,000 members, which may not seem like a lot, but considering you can barely get all the Krav Maga people together in one room, I would say 10,000 members is actually a really good group. And there's a lot of the top people in there and sharing history of Krav Maga, photos, etc. That's what got my attention to Ron originally. And something we actually discuss about how it's really confusing for non-Israelis who don't grow up in the Krav Maga culture in Israel to understand what's going on in Israel and how it works there, because it's very different than how it may work in your country, which actually allows a lot of fraudsters from Israel to go around the world and start selling stuff because they couldn't make it in Israel, and they go around selling nonsense. Everyone in Krav Maga at the higher levels in Israel knows each other. They all know who's who. They all know what's what. So a page like Krav Maga History and Culture is very useful as a base page to look at. Of course, they tend to keep the politics out, and the behind-the-scenes stories that some people may or may not have heard are not there, because everyone's trying to be polite, which is good. Now, Ron has his own school now called Israeli Krav Maga Institute with Ron Rotem, and he's doing his own thing now, broken away from many of the other groups to which he has previously been involved, which seems to be the trend of people who don't want to deal with these giant organizations that have become more bureaucratic than anything, and not naming names or anything, and neither does Ron. He's good at that. His tagline on his Facebook group, because he doesn't have a website yet, is just so Israeli Krav Maga Institute with Ron Rotem. You can find it on Facebook, and the tagline is, "It's better to be a student of reality than a master of illusion." And that's one thing that some Krav Maga people, again, not pointing it to anyone, may have forgotten about reality. Now, something Ron said, which was very interesting, is that there's two components to a good Krav Maga program: the self-defense and the combatives. And Krav Maga has gotten really good at the self-defense, as in 10 to 30 second situation, fight for your life, get out, or end the threat, and has fallen behind on the combatives, being the kickboxing, boxing, footwork, wrestling, judo, jiu-jitsu, all the other aspects of when you can no longer just run, you don't have a gun, and you have to get good combatives. And that's something that often a lot of people in the greater martial arts world have picked up about Krav Maga, and it's given us a black eye a little bit. So hopefully some people wake up and realize in your Krav program, you got to diversify. You got to teach a little bit of everything. And you got to keep it simple. You can't lose those self-defense principles. Otherwise, it's hard to call it Krav Maga. So I found this podcast super fascinating, because there's a lot of the Krav Maga history I've missed or been misinterpreted or whatever, because a lot of the information isn't available in English, and my Hebrew is garbage. So there's that. So the first little bit is very much about history of Krav Maga and how Krav Maga works in Israel. So if you're a Krav Maga student, this is one for you, because it's not what you think it is. And then we sort of talk about our Krav Maga philosophies and our approaches. And so I think this is an amazing listen if you are a great Krav Maga student of any kind, of any organization. And I want to point out that the time difference between where I am and Israel is horrible. I got up at just before 2 a.m. my time to sit down and have this conversation with Ron. Took a little bit of scheduling. So if there's anyone else in the Krav Maga world in Israel that wants to talk to me about Krav Maga and martial arts, I am clearly more than happy to get up at ridiculous hours to have that conversation with you. But this one is with Ron Rotem, so enjoy this episode. Okay, I know that's so dramatic. Anyways, here it is. Krav Maga is not just a self-defense system, it is a way of life. Warriors Den is a podcast for Kravists, fighters, martial artists, warriors, politicians, and general citizens. Consider this. The society that separates scholars from its warriors will have its thinking done by cowards and its fighting done by fools. Lucidity. Your host, Jonathan Fader, talks to guests in an open and uncensored format about their fights, their philosophies, and their lives. No topic is taboo, and the conversation may start in one place and end in another. As the quote suggests, you cannot separate the warrior from the politics and the world around them, as a true warrior must be a student in all forms of art and science.
You're listening to The Warrior's Day. Brought to you by Urban Tactics Krav Maga, turning lambs into lions.
Okay. Welcome. Excuse me. A little late where I'm recording, so my voice is going to be hoarse, but that's okay. Welcome back. I'm here with Ron Rotem. He's Israeli Krav Maga Instructor, admin of the Facebook group Krav Maga History and Culture, and instructor at the Krav Maga Institute, Israeli Krav Maga Institute. How are you today?
Very good, thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, of course. I love the history of Krav Maga, and I found your Facebook group, and it's a very interesting topic because being in North America, unfortunately, a lot of people don't really know the details of the history of Krav Maga. We kind of know, but it's lost in translation a little bit, or in myth or ethos. But before we get into that, I thought we'd start about how did you get into Krav Maga originally?
Okay, so I'll start by saying that in 1995, I met my Krav Maga instructor while I was chasing a guy who was a Krav Maga student.
Yeah.
And we had a little conflict between the two of us.
Yeah.
And I got by mistake to his gym. And in that gym, my instructor, Erez, he was there, and he told me, if you want to fight, put on the boxing gloves, and now you will fight.
Yeah.
And of course, we did not fight. That guy left the Krav Maga class in about 6 months, and I stayed.
Yeah.
So,
and just went from there?
So from there, I went on with Krav Maga. In 1999, I did my 2 instructor courses. In Israel, we have to do an assistant instructor course. It's about the green belt level. That course, I was privileged enough to do it with Eli Avigzar. Eli Avigzar is one of Imi's top students, a guy with a lot of history and contribution to the Krav Maga world and to the martial arts here in Israel.
Yeah.
And in about, also in 1999, I did the instructor course. In Israel, it's 1 month, like in a boarding school.
Yeah.
And also I did it with Eli Avigzar and his top student, Avia Besidon. So I guess in that point, I just learned Krav Maga for a few instructors and had the chance to understand that Krav Maga is a little bit different depending on the instructor that is teaching it to you.
Yeah.
And so I think in 2001, I went to the army. In Israel, it's mandatory service. At that point, I was already a black belt in Krav Maga, and I joined the anti-guerrilla unit in Israel. It's like a special infantry forces. And over there, also, in one point, taught the guys how to shoot and how to do Krav Maga. And in the Israeli Defense Forces, you have to do, even if you're a Krav Maga instructor from the civilian life, you have to do a secondary course, which is the Army Krav Maga. And I saw that the Army Krav Maga is quite different than the civilian Krav Maga. So this is a marker for me. When I left the army after 3 years, I continued with my Krav Maga path, and I joined the Israeli prison service. I'm jumping from time to time. I had more things, between.
No, we'll cover it. Don't worry.
Yeah, I hope so. So to cover the main things, I joined the Israeli prison service. And in the Israel prison service, I was the head of the self-defense studying. And there I saw that, again, we have different Krav Maga.
Yeah.
It's not the same Krav Maga that we have in the civilian life. It's not the same as the army Krav Maga.
Yeah.
It's for the prison service. It's something
Yeah.
different. So from that point on, I think my life changed a bit. I started researching Krav Maga, and it's important to say because I forgot to say, in the army, after I left the military service, I came back and I was the head of the Krav Maga section for the Israeli Defense Force,
Yeah.
which is the same role that Imi, the
Yeah.
founder of Krav Maga, did, and Elia Vigzar did. They filled that role. It wasn't exactly the same role because it was something else back then, but we'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
So I saw that Krav Maga can have many faces, as I early recognized when I did it as a young boy. And I started researching it. And I had the privilege to know Hebrew because I live here,
Yeah.
and to know most of the guys. We all live here in Israel. In the center of Israel is most Krav Maga school. So if you live here and you're really involved in Krav Maga, you will know everybody. You can talk with everybody. You can train with everybody. So I started doing it my own way, starting to understand what was missing in Krav Maga, what was its benefits, and the weak links of Krav Maga. Because when you teach it in the army or in the Israeli prison service, you take a guy, or it doesn't make a difference if it's a girl or a boy, if it's a man or a woman. It's to take someone who knows something. You only have a very, very short period of time to make him better. And I noticed that when you take a guy that, let's say, did some boxing, classic boxing or Muay Thai, and you teach him Krav Maga, he became very, very good. Let's say as good as a black belt in Krav Maga, as a person that did Krav Maga for many years. And he only did, let's say, 1 month of Krav Maga. And 1 month, when I say 1 month, it's the biggest security course that there is of Krav Maga.
Yeah.
So it made my approach a bit different. As most people know, Krav Maga builds out of the two subjects: self-defense, which is the main subject, and hand-to-hand combat. With time, Krav Maga became very, very good in the self-defense object.
Yeah.
But it became maybe the hand-to-hand combat section was a little bit neglected.
Yeah.
So we know self-defense very good. We know how to handle ourselves in a conflict. If someone is coming and he's punching you only one punch, and you did the self-defense drill, and you manage to do it, wow, you are very good. Maybe you de-escalate, and maybe you manage to, cut off the distance, get away, and so on. But what will happen if you have to move on? Person will not fall from the first or second punch. Now you have to fight.
Yeah.
Maybe you are fighting a professional. Those tools, for me, were something that's missing. And it's made me do my research and train in boxing and other stuff to fill in the missing links, as the way I saw Krav Maga.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense, and that could be part of the confusion. I mean, even like you doing it in Israel, right, with the origin of Krav Maga, you said, 3 different types you learn of different organizations. And this is actually probably why it's so confusing in North America, because it's all sorts of organizations here that often lose touch with Israel because they can't keep up with all the changes in Israel. I've trained with multiple organizations myself, all with different styles. And whenever I'm explaining to my students that, I can see their eyes just like they don't care. It's actually from, a business perspective why I just kind of did my own thing, like many people are doing in North America, because the students here don't care what organization, they just want to come and learn. And I actually had the similar experience. I started with the traditional organization, with the set curriculum, and I just figured it's too much if I'm going to try to do that short time span. And then I took away all the curriculum, all the techniques that I thought weren't the best. And then same sort of realization was that combat skills weren't there. So I started integrating the wrestling and the judo and the boxing as needed to fill up, the little gaps, to build people up. And then I still encourage my students to do jujitsu or boxing or kickboxing. Go train with the professionals, so they fill in that gap. So it's very interesting to hear that in Israel people have the exact same conclusion from the traditional days. Because I mean I don't know how many organizations there are in Israel anymore, let alone let alone the rest of the world. And I think that could be the confusion for non-Krav Maga people, because I don't know about you, but I've noticed online recently, like people are going after Krav Maga in the last 2 months, 3 months. For a reason I don't know. It's probably related to the war, but it's fascinating. Um, what else can you expand, like the difference? Because you mentioned you saw differences between the military and the security and the civilian aspect. What specific differences did you notice through your journey?
Well, I think this is a time for us to speak about history in order to understand what happened here in the military and the differences between the military, the Israeli prison service, civilian Krav Maga, Israeli police. I'm specifically speaking about the Israeli security forces because these are the ones that I know, and these are the force, or these are the source of Krav Maga in many aspects. Because when Imi joined the army, he was a Kapap instructor. Kapap is a Krav Panim El Panim, hand-to-hand combat. This is the former name of the military style fighting. It was a very strict method. They had manuals and they had their curriculum for the army. In 1953, I think, when Imi was just a regular instructor in the army, he was in charge of like a squad of 3 guys, 3 instructors. Their job was to take Krav Maga, or to take the face-to-face combat, and to create something more suitable for an army. Because before the establishment of the state of Israel, we had like resistance forces, Jewish resistance forces, underground forces that protected the Jewish settlements here in the land of Israel. And after the establishment of the country and after the independence war, we had an army. Now it's an army, it's different. So he changed it, and the name that was given to it was Krav Maga. So no longer Kapap, now it was called Krav Maga. But since people were regular to the name, they're accustomed to the name Kapap, they continued to call it Kapap for many, many years. But in the army, the headline was Krav Maga. When Imi left the army, about 1963-64, he started teaching. He was a boxer, he was a wrestler, he knew jiu-jitsu in the European style of jiu-jitsu. And he started training. He had like a flyer, Imi, black belt, the former instructor or the head instructor of the IDF. This was his flyer. No Krav Maga mentioned. And when you came to Imi to train, you did gymnastics, and you didn't have no gi or belts or anything. Gymnastics, jiu-jitsu, some boxing, just like going to a gym today, and when you have MMA and this and that. And with time, people came and trained with Krav Maga. You can, of course, recognize the name Chaim Zut as one of the first students. Rafi Garisi and Chaim Zut met Imi in the army as soldiers. So they heard that he opened his gym, they came to train, and Eli Avigdar came to train. And those guys, they trained in army uniforms. And Imi was teaching them the army Krav Maga, what he knew.
Yeah.
But they were very dedicated to the subject. And they asked Imi a lot of questions, and more people came in. Imi was very charismatic and very well known. So step by step, it became a system. Imi started writing all the drills that he wants. And he said, wow, okay, I need to divide it into sections. So he saw judo. He had judo in his gym, and he saw the belts and the gi. Most of his guys trained in judo with Imi in Krav Maga or whatever Imi taught, and in judo with other instructors. So they became, proficient in judo. And Imi started taking the belts, and he said, okay, yellow belts, I don't know about judo, but yellow belts in Krav Maga, it will be this, and this. And they got like a yellow page that it was reading on, and then the orange belt and so on, and they built a system. The system was very, how do I say it in English? It was quite poor. It was like taking stuff from all over the place, with for me, with a lot of DNA from boxing, and started teaching it, to take the Army Krav Maga and to expand it in order for people to learn it without being bored for a long time. Imi had a vision, but the vision was not so clear as I see it. In the late 70s, Krav Maga was a system on its own, a lot of students, very big in Israel. And Israel was, let's say, a young country. We had Judo, we had karate, and we had Krav Maga, nothing else. And Imi created like an association, the Israeli Krav Maga Association, because this what was done in Israel in order to get funds from the state, to make it easier. And in the beginning of the 80s, Eli Avigdor joined the army as the head of the Krav Maga section. He was the Imi's top student at the time, and Imi said, okay, they want a serious guy. He was very much involved in the army. He said, okay, Eli, you will join the army, and Eli joined the army. In that point, the Krav Maga in the army was very similar to the one that was being taught outside of the army. Very, very similar. If you knew the Army Krav Maga, you pretty much knew the civilian Krav Maga. In the end of the 80s, the Israeli Krav Maga Association broke off. Eli left, and he left with a lot of students to create his own thing, his own organization, the Israeli Krav Maga Association. He just changed one letter in Hebrew in order to make it different from the original association. He was in very good relationships with Imi, but he said, I want to do my own things. I don't want people to interrupt. I was the head of the Israeli Defense Forces Krav Maga section. I know what I'm doing. He was also a black belt in Judo, a black belt in Aikido. He felt like he knows his stuff. And the Israeli Krav Maga Association became something different. It was starting to spread out outside of Israel. In 81, by the way, it was spread out to the US by an American philanthrope who created Slim Fast. You remember Slim Fast?
Vaguely. I've not heard that for a while.
Well, it was the main thing. I don't know. He sent it with, I think it was something like $1 billion. The company he was a very rich man. And he told Imi, I would like you and all your top instructors to come to the US and to teach Krav Maga, to make people aware of Krav Maga. And they did it. And it was originally only for the Jewish communities. And they also introduced it to the FBI, according to the legend, the police, CIA, and so on. And some instructors stayed there to teach it. And in a while, few instructors, Darren Levine is one of them, Ellen Feldman, Rick Bilstein, they came here to Israel and they started doing the first foreign instructors Krav Maga course here in Israel. I think it was 3 months.
Yeah, that's the famous photo, right? There's that famous photo that everyone always shares everywhere, right?
Yeah. In Israel, nobody noticed that they have like a special course because, people here are living their lives. And some of them didn't even speak English. So, okay, there are foreigners here. Okay, well, the foreigners will train. We will train next to them. Nobody cared back then. But when Krav Maga left Israel, it became something different because people asked questions. Why is Krav Maga guys are with white belts? They have white gis and they have belts. So here in Israel, we said, okay, I'm saying we said, but I wasn't even 10 years old at the time. But so people asked questions. They said, okay, maybe we need to change the white gi to something more suitable for an Israeli system, for a Western system. And maybe we should change the uniform to something more suitable for daily life here in Israel and in the West. Krav Maga became different. And as I mentioned before, after Eli Avigdor left to do his own thing, Eyal Yanilov and Shaike Barak, also top Imi instructors, they started changing the method. They wrote the famous Black Book, and it was very different from the original Krav Maga syllabus that Imi created. Of course, Imi approved that book, and Krav Maga became a bit different. With time, Krav Maga also returned to the same path, and I will tell you why. Because most of the Krav Maga instructors here in Israel, they will also be Krav Maga instructors in the army.
Mm.
So we have like a gathering, a meeting in the army. We meet each other, and then from the army we leave again, teaching it to civilians again. Almost all the time we're intertwined. Everything has a unique touch because everything here is very small, and you train with everybody. So I think even though Krav Maga took different path in the end of the 90s, now, as you said, even in the US and other places, people are starting doing the same thing. They take Krav Maga and they go deep. They say, okay, if you know how to move and how to punch, maybe we need to add some more boxing to be more proficient in fighting. If you know how to kick, okay, Muay Thai guys, they kick best. Maybe we should learn a bit from them because Imi was not a Muay Thai fighter. When he
Mm.
added kick, it was like he was a movement genius. He know how to look at stuff and to take it to his own Krav Maga.
Yeah.
But as long as Krav Maga saw different things, the Krav Maga teachers saw different things, Krav Maga became more deep, but more wide.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. No,
So
that's it's fascinating. Like some of the stuff you mentioned, like I don't even know because a lot of it's not in English, and when I ask people, sometimes it's the he said, she said kind of thing. No, 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 he said this. No, that's not what really happened. Like the whole IKMF, KMG, IKMA split, and I noticed that there was a time when a lot of the information on the websites kept changing, so I can't even keep track of it. So it's very it's insightful to sort of get a very quick, short explanation of that sort of progress, because it's confusing as hell for us over here in North America, let alone Israelis.
I have to say, when I'm telling you the story, in my mind, in the back of my mind, there are a lot of things that I'm not mentioning.
Mm,
And this is why I'm saying to you and everybody that will listen to this podcast, there are a lot of missing links, even in what I'm saying,
yeah,
because we are talking about people.
yeah,
There are a lot of people that contributed to Krav Maga, and everybody has his own angle. And this wasn't exactly like this, and he was not really Imi's student; he
yeah.
was his student. It doesn't really matter, but it exists.
Yeah, it's like the some people I've trained with. They kind of say like, "Oh, Emmy didn't really create it because they're focused on that kapop aspect." And like, "Oh, there were people in Israel before him," and so I kind of got around that by saying, "Listen, he's the founder of modern Krav Maga. Yes, there were people before him. Can we just stop arguing about this?"
And it's funny because when I started learning Krav Maga, my father is 73 years old, maybe
Hmm.
74 now. And he told me, I know Kapap. Let me
Yeah.
teach you some moves. And I started Krav Maga. And
Yeah.
he know how to handle himself, like in the basic moves and so on. People knew how to fight. In everywhere that you go and people had to fight for their lives, they knew how to fight. But Imi, he took that fighting and, like you said, he created something a bit different or maybe more organized,
Hmm.
but he created it. A lot of the guys that people are mentioning from the Kapap world, they were here when Imi created Krav Maga. Some of them said, okay, Imi, he's like a professional, he's a boxer, he's a wrestler. We did Kapap, because we had to. They
Yeah.
didn't teach it to civilian people. It wasn't very interesting to them.
Yeah.
Kapap just re-emerged in the 90s or maybe even a decade later when Krav Maga became famous and
Hmm.
widespread. Kapap re-emerged and said, okay, we are the source, but the basic Kapap is very poor and the
Hmm.
basic Krav Maga is very poor. It's very different than the things that we see today, both in Kapap and Krav Maga.
Yeah. Now you mentioned the belts because I know there's the two main, three ideologies. I would say the people who go with the belts, people who go with the patches, and people who say you shouldn't have ranks at all. Now I went with belts because I think more people globally understand what a black belt is and what a yellow belt is. Patch system I find is a bit confusing to people. And then there's the people who say no ranking at all because no ranking at the streets. Now, my opinion on that is, well, human beings like gold stars and they also need to have a sense of progress. So even if that is true, because a belt is more of a milestone than necessarily a skill. What are your thoughts on ranking and progression?
I totally agree. In Israel, belts were a big issue. People only recognize belts when they come to the Krav Maga gym, although Krav Maga is kind of famous outside of Israel. Here is something like, the local view.
Mm,
So people will enter a karate gym and they will ask the instructor, is this Krav Maga? And they will come to the Krav Maga gym and they will ask the same, is this karate? They
mm,
don't really know the difference.
yeah.
So some say, okay, we'll be with the belts in the traditional Krav Maga way, and everybody will understand because everybody knows what a black belt is and a white belt.
Mm,
And some say, exactly as you mentioned before, grades are very important, but we don't want belts. We want something different. We want people to recognize the fact that Krav Maga is different. So we have patches
mm,
here, no matter where.
yeah.
I like the patches system better because for me, Krav Maga is part of the Israeli culture,
Mm,
and belts, although are more familiar, and it's very easy to buy them in the store. In Israel, it's very hard to manufacture patches,
mm.
but the belts are very easy to acquire.
Yeah.
But I don't want a guy to enter my gym and it will look exactly the same as the karate gym. And I don't want people outside of Israel to see the belts and they will say, Krav Maga is exactly like karate, because it's not. It's something different.
Mm,
And the degrees that I use are exactly like the color system of belts.
yeah.
But for me, it helps emphasize the fact that Krav Maga is a bit different, something
Yeah.
different, different culture.
Yeah.
But to say the truth, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
If a guy that works with me will say, Ron, listen, I live in Spain, for example, and I think that belts are better, I will say, okay, use the belts.
Yeah.
For me, it's the same, but grades are very important for me as well.
Yeah, I mean, I just, because I studied a bit of psychology, and if you don't give people something, people will, as you mentioned, you actually mentioned like we need to sort of expand it, otherwise Krav Maga gets boring. Like if you're teaching the same self defense, forever, it does get boring. And so, in order to keep people's interest to the point where they can develop the skill to realistically be able to defend themselves in more situations, I feel it's a necessary thing to have some kind of rankings, because humans will be humans whether we like it or not.
Exactly. No, it's
Yeah.
like a candy because I practice boxing, and it was very funny because one of the guys, he's the national Israeli champion for 10 years,
Mm,
and he came to train with me in Krav Maga. And he was not with a Krav Maga uniform, and he started punching. And most of my guys are with daily clothes, only with the t-shirt of Krav Maga. And we have like here the degree, the brown, like a brown patch or so on, like a mark on the
yeah.
shirt. And that guy started doing shadow boxing. And the new guy came into the gym and he told me, please, ask me, please explain about the system and, the level, the degrees. And he pointed out to the national boxing champion. He said, okay, I understand. This is a black belt. But what are those? And he pointed out to different students.
Yeah.
And that guy from boxing never trained in Krav Maga. It was his first lesson.
Yeah.
But that guy that came in, he saw him moving. He said, okay, this is Krav Maga. This is a black belt, because he saw how good it is.
Yeah.
So you enter a boxing gym in like 1 minute, you understand who knows his stuff, who's learning, and so on. But for, let's say, people that are doing martial arts for twice a week, not as a profession, those people, they need those markers. They
Yeah.
need it. It helps them. Some of them, when they get their black belt, they say, I don't want the belt anymore. Okay,
Yeah.
now I'm not interested anymore. It
Yeah.
happens, but
Yeah.
it's like maturity. It takes time, and the belts
Yeah.
help.
Yeah, I know, and that's an interesting sort of thing, is that the professional or the athlete versus the average person, and I always have to remind people that if I'm teaching to, like, I could be teaching to a soccer mom, or I could be teaching to an athlete, and I have to train them all at the same time, and that I find is a difficult task for a lot of instructors, to make that realization that I need to come up with a way to teach everybody without making it too difficult for one group but boring for the other group. Now, I've found Every once in a while, I'll get someone who's an amazing athlete and they have a fighting background, and they get bored. They don't want to train because the sort of skill set of the average person, they're used to training with professionals, and they don't see the value in the self defense aspect because they don't feel challenged. And it's always an interesting dynamic to try to manage, right? You get that
Totally
a lot
agree.
in Israel, or is that just a North American thing?
No, no. In Israel, it's the same. It's the
Yeah,
same. And you see a guy, he wants to train in Krav Maga, and he's very good. He knows how to punch, he knows how to kick. You will not teach him how to punch and how to kick because he already came with that knowledge.
yeah.
And now you need to take the self-defense aspect and to make it interesting to him.
Mm.
To have like him wanting to stay, to learn more. As you said, it happens here a lot as well.
Yeah, yeah, because I can
And
see like some organizations in Israel or North America, you can see they really tailor to the athletes, and then some tailor to like the soccer moms, as I'll call them, and it's all over the place. Now, I think one of the issues that I have in the Krav Maga world as a whole, and it could be part of the reason that there is sort of a bad look to it, is the whole instructor thing, right? Because you were saying that it takes a month or 2 months, sort of, in Israel to get a proper instructor certification. But then there's organizations, hey, come for a 4-day course. After 6 months of training, here's your instructor thing, which drives me nuts. I think you need to have a minimum couple of years experience at least, in the system that you're teaching at least. And it's just creating quality control issues. And it's a well-known sort of thing right now. What do you think about that whole situation?
a few years ago, I was very upset about that. I started
Mm,
traveling the world teaching Krav Maga, and I was really upset about Krav Maga. I said, okay, in Israel, the level is quite good in most places because it's close to the source.
mm,
But when you travel around the world, you see very bad things sometimes. So I try to create like a forum of senior Krav Maga instructors through the Wingate the Academic College to have like the academia in Israel to control it. So people that will take like the instructor course here or by that academic college, you have to do it the proper way. But it was not good.
mm,
It was very hard to do it. And then I understood that, you know what? You cannot control it.
mm,
Uncontrollable. You can only control yourself. You control the guys that you work with. And if you're a professional and people are coming to you and say, okay, you will train for 2 months and now you'll do the 5 days instructor course and now you go teach. You need to understand that it's not good. And if
mm,
you're a student and you seek out a good teacher, you have to understand that a good teacher is the one that didn't only train for 2 months and did the 5 days instructor course. And of course, it's very hard to, say to someone who doesn't know martial arts, okay, you need to search for this and that, but there is no other way. You cannot control it because every time someone will emerge and he will do the same thing, like uncontrollable business environment.
yeah,
Everybody
yeah,
should do their own thing, and to do it is the best that they can.
yeah. I found, at least from what I've seen, I haven't done. I wish I could do more courses, but money, time, travel, it gets expensive.
So,
There's a focus often on the technical proficiency rather than the actual instructing, right? Now, I have not done the 2 months, 1 month course or a Wingate. Is there a lot of like teaching components in those courses, or is it more about, hey, we want to see technical proficiency?
most of it are emphasis on the teaching abilities
Mm,
because to do the instructor course here in Israel, you have to be a black belt in order
mm,
to get the degree or to get the diploma because for the that instructor course because this is something that the state created. It's not only about Krav Maga. You
mm.
go and you do a basic martial arts instructor course. If
Yeah.
you train in karate, you will do it with the other guys. Everybody together, they will learn anatomy, physiology, psychology, and so on. And they will learn with like a like an instructor for their own system. There will be someone from karate. He will teach them karate for, let's say, a week out of for the 1 month course. They will do a bit karate, but since they are already black belts or brown belts, they will know their stuff. They will know how to do it. Now you only need to teach them how to teach it.
Yeah.
Something different. So most of the course is about how to teach what you already know, not about creating you as a better fighter or self-defense practitioner.
Yeah.
But you know, I have to say one thing. 1 month, 1 year doesn't really matter. By the way, in Israel, you have an instructor course for 1 month and a coach's course for 1 year. Even after that coach course for 1 year, you still don't know how to teach. In order to know how to teach, you need to teach. You teach a lot of people, young people, soldiers, police officers, everybody. Then you start understanding this is like an ancient profession, profession.
Yeah.
And it's very hard. So those courses, like they're just like the V mark. You need to do it, but it will not create a good instructor, no matter which course you're going to do. I did in my life a lot of Krav Maga instructor courses, civilian one, army one, Israeli police service one, the coaches course, and so on and so on. After each course, I became more proficient, but I became good in teaching only after spending time teaching it, spending time living with other teachers. You know, seeing people that are training those kind of populations, hearing them, understanding them. This is the only way to do it. Final thing about it, look at doctors. You know, when you became a doctor, after you studied everything in theory, they send you to the hospital. You know nothing, but now you're a doctor, a medicine doctor, and now you have to treat people. And you see the other doctors, you know, the senior doctors, and you learn from them. You're already a doctor. You can treat people. Do exactly what he does. But still, you have to look at him. You're going to the surgery with him, and you learn how to make that surgery and so on. The same in martial arts and in Krav Maga. You need a good instructor to be with. You stay with him for a very, very long time. Then you will become good in teaching.
Yeah. No, it's funny. There was a situation, because I'm in Vancouver, Canada, where there was a very well-known, let's call him fraud, that for some reason had his headquarters here in Canada for a while, and he had a bunch of instructors under him, and then he got blown out of the water, as they say, where, hey, you don't call it Krav Maga, you're a fraud, etc., etc. And some of the instructors locally were looking around for a path to getting a new certification because they're like, this is no good. And they learned under some people who kind of just sort of like, here's your instructor certification, but they're like, oh, this is no good either. It's not good. And then they asked me, hey, I'd only been open a few years, and they asked, hey, can we become instructors under you? And some of these people, they were better martial artists than me by a long shot, and better just fighters overall, because I'm mediocre at best, to be honest. And I said to them, you can, but it's going to take you 6 months to a year, because I need you to know how I teach, and I need to know that you can teach, because from what I've seen, you can't teach Krav Maga. And of course, their response was, I don't want to do that. I'm good. And now, as far as I know, they're not really teaching much anymore because they just didn't want to put in the work. And I suspect that's a global problem. Hey, you need to, if I become an instructor under your organization or ranked under your organization, I'm a white belt under your organization until you tell me otherwise. And if I go to a different organization, I'm a white belt until you tell me otherwise. And people just hate that. They don't want to reset.
It's a big problem. It's a big, big problem. And I can understand those guys, but this is not professional. If you want to do something good, you have to learn it from the beginning. You take the white belt again, and it's fun. It's fun. Just don't be so serious about yourself. No, black belt, I'm a third dan, I'm this and that. It doesn't really matter. It's for you, it's for your students. Many of the guys that came to train with me, I have a guy that's training with me, and he was a third dan in Krav Maga from Europe. And he told me after he did some training with me, he told me, you know what, Ron? I don't want that third dan. I want to start from the white belt. And now, unfortunately, because of the COVID situation, he didn't do the black belt exam. But hopefully next year he will come after, I think, 5 or 6 years that we're training together. And after he was third dan in Krav Maga, and now, only now, he's doing the black belt again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And everybody are very happy about it. I'm happy about it. He's happy about it. His students are happy about it because he's a professional. He
Yeah.
doesn't really care.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. I was actually supposed to come to Israel last year. COVID happened. I was going to train with someone and meet a whole bunch of people. My girlfriend was really excited. She's never been to Israel. Boom, can't go. And now we'll see what happens. Things are changing in my life. Hopefully, I can try again next year, the year after. But it'll be interesting for sure.
I think
Now,
it's very interesting for a Krav Maga practitioner to come to Israel and to train here in Krav Maga. It's like, you know, for me, I traveled to Thailand to do Muay Thai, and I was, whoa, Muay Thai in the homeland, it's something different.
Yeah. Well, you know, I actually, you know, I served in the IDF. I don't know if you know, I was Haiti Begavati. And before
If
I
you
went
speak
over,
Hebrew, why do we have to speak English all the time? Come on.
I have not spoken Hebrew in 10 years, and I only learned Hebrew to go. Funny story. So I went to Israel. My parents don't speak Hebrew. I went to Israel. I went to Ulpan in Tel Aviv. You know, 2 months. Started learning. It was getting pretty good. Then I went to the army. Went to what's the army Ulpan called again? I'm totally forgetting. It's been so long.
I'm not sure I ever knew the
Yeah,
name.
so you know they send all the Chayalim Bodedim to this place. Maybe I'll remember the name later. Sorry?
Kavat HaShomer?
No, I'm not. I don't think so. Maybe I it's been so long, I can't remember. Anyways, and I start learning in the army Ulpan, and then it was mostly about discipline and strict and get up and do this, and we barely even learned any Hebrew. And then we go off to combat, and then almost everyone just spoke English to me, so my Hebrew got worse. You know, I was fortunate where I was. I think if well, it's good and bad. I think if I went somewhere where they only spoke Hebrew, then I would speak Hebrew today. But because I spoke English most of the time and Hebrew when I needed to, my Hebrew is gone. And then when I came back, I don't speak here. So every once in a while, you know, I got a phone call the other day, an Israeli woman, you know, you speak Hebrew. I was like, not enough to sell you on Krav Maga. You know, I'll speak English.
No. You know, I have to tell you something. You know Yaron Lichtenstein? Have you heard the name?
It sounds familiar. Yeah.
He's one of Imi's top students, and he's
Yeah.
teaching Krav Maga in the same exact way it was taught in the 70s, with the white geese and the same syllabus. And he says that Imi wanted everybody to speak Hebrew in Krav Maga lesson, to
Yeah.
say the terms in Hebrew.
Yeah.
And when I first heard about it, I said, nonsense. Imi was not so good in Hebrew.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is the real story, and nobody knows it from other Imi students. But I noticed that in boxing lessons, for example, the teacher always says, okay, jab, now cross, step over. You know, he's mixing the Hebrew with English, and he's Romanian.
Yeah.
He's not even, you know, like American or British or something. So I guess that Hebrew in Krav Maga is kind of the same. If you
Yeah.
control the language and the professional terms, it makes it easier.
Yeah. Except in North America, people don't. You know, it's funny in North America, regardless of what it is. I think one of the reasons Brazilian Jiu Jitsu took off so well is because they didn't do that. They're like, here, choke each other out. Because nowadays, people are just they want to learn, but they don't want to learn the culture or the history. Which I make my students learn the history once they stick around long enough, and they've like, no, this is what I want to train. I'm like, you're learning the history, you're learning about Israel, you have to. But if I try to force that on people too early, they're like, this isn't what I signed up for. I don't want to learn that. I just want to learn to defend myself. You know, people have this idea of what it is, and then you tell them it's something else. They always get annoyed, right?
No, I'm using the back door for doing it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not, people are not coming to my gym to see all the culture and the pictures and so on that I put on because it's nice for me to have all those pictures. But when people want to know in a certain point or when I do a certain technique and I tell the history of that technique, it makes people open their eyes and to open their mind about what happened. Why is Krav Maga Krav Maga? Why is it developed in a certain way?
Yeah.
Because I think it's a good point that I would like to mention about Krav Maga. Sometimes when Krav Maga was developed, they took some of the old syllabus and they say, okay, in the old Krav Maga syllabus, they had like 13 options to release from a front choke. And with time, they took those 13 options and they, like creating the golden key. Now we have only two, static or dynamic.
Yeah.
But all of the 13 options are good options.
Yeah.
Sometimes I told myself, why? Why did they throw it out so easily? So for me, as a Krav Maga teacher that would like to preserve the system, I took all of those techniques and I found a certain point in which those certain techniques are very good. Maybe not against the choke, maybe in different situations. Because for me, it's very important to understand what Krav Maga was and where were we going with it.
Yeah.
Because Krav Maga is a whole system. A person can learn only Krav Maga, in my point of view, and become very good in the street,
Yeah.
in the violent streets or in the street scenarios. It doesn't have to learn Krav Maga, Jiu-Jitsu, boxing, Muay Thai. Not everybody are professionals that want to widen their horizons that much.
Yeah.
But for me, if people ask me, Ron, I want to be a better in Krav Maga, let's say a black belt. Should I add more, 3 more Krav Maga lessons a week? Those guys, I say, no, you need to go deep, not to go wide. In Krav Maga, you are proficient. Okay, now take the boxing aspect of Krav Maga. You can go and train in boxing. You want to walk better with your legs? Okay, you can go to, I don't know, Muay Thai or something else that will create better legs, better clinch, better elbows, and so on and so on. Go deep, don't go too wide.
Yeah.
Because for me, Krav Maga has to have a certain DNA. If you go too wide, you lose the DNA, you become worse, not better.
Yeah.
When I looked at Imi's first syllabus, I noticed that most of the drills came from boxing, sidestepping against kicks. Most
Yeah.
of the defenses are sidestepping against kicks. Like in boxing, you cut the distance from kicks to hands because he was a boxer. He was a wrestler. This is what he does.
Yeah.
So I took this, and now when I think that we have something missing, maybe a new threat that I think that we need to address, I take it upon the boxing DNA. I'm not trying to do it BJJ, let's do this, let's take him down, because the guys will never be as good in BJJ as they are good in striking. You have to create something that will talk with each other. It
Yeah.
does not mean that you cannot do it all the
Yeah.
time. If you don't have an answer in boxing, of course, or in the DNA of boxing, okay, go wide. But if you do, try to create it upon the same DNA. Eli Avisa had a saying, minimum against maximum. You want
Yeah.
to have minimum techniques, minimum movements against maximum movements, maximum attacks. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to live by that law.
Yeah. No, it's good. I mean, I'm glad to hear that. Just without me, it's kind of how I developed it as well. Like, so one of the areas that I found starting Krav Maga that was extremely weak was the grappling, right? And at that time, the UFC was becoming very popular, and I had actually just come back from the army, and I was at a bar watching the UFC. There happened to be a jiu-jitsu guy there with his posters. He was a third Dan, I think, under Megaton Diaz. And I said, okay, I signed up. And, that's where I started my journey. Now, at the time when I started my school, I had a business partner who'd been doing Krav Maga before me. I'd learned from him as well. And he had a judo background. I think he was a blue belt in judo. But we were following an old curriculum. And after a while, I'm like, okay, in the curriculum we're teaching, there's no the grappling. Where's the grappling? And it took me a very long time, both because I needed to understand jujitsu better and grappling, and I needed to teach more and understand Krav Maga. How do I integrate this grappling component in a way that, as you said, sticks, to the principles? And through learning from different people, the grappling component that I teach is basically the positions. Here's the positions. This one's better. This one's worse. Get out. Create space and get up. And then I say, even to this day, my students hate the groundwork. They're like, it's so hard. It's so exhausting. And I'm not even doing complicated stuff. And I'm like, well, go do jujitsu, because where I teach, there's a jujitsu club with some amazing black belts. I learn under them now, too. And it's like, go train with them, But I'm not going to teach a lot of the popular stuff in jujitsu, because to me, it doesn't apply. I'm not going to throw a triangle on someone if they have a knife, even though it's a very high percentage jiu-jitsu stranglehold that works, and we do them for self-defense. To me, it's going to take 5 years for you to be proficient at that technique against most people. So I just didn't put it in my curriculum, but I don't stop people from learning it. How do you kind of approach the grappling aspect in your program?
Well, in the same way, in the exact way that you mentioned, there are a lot of things that I like to learn for myself to understand it. I did some BJJ, and I would like to do more in the future, but I don't find BJJ it's something that will stick into Krav Maga's DNA.
Yeah.
A lot of things when you study something. My Krav Maga instructor is also a BJJ instructor. He was teaching BJJ, purely BJJ once a week. And most of us did not like it. Most of the senior Krav Maga instructors, we did it because it's important. It really is important, but we did not like it, and it did not stuck to our Krav Maga. So I guess it's more problematic taking BJJ into Krav Maga. The basic things are very easy. How to get out of a choke in a Krav Maga way, using some BJJ principles, like the bases and so on. But to give more will change the DNA of Krav Maga, and will make people, as I said before, less good.
Yeah. If you make it too complicated. I remember one of my old instructors, I think he was a Bulgarian guy, actually ex-Air Force pilot, very serious, very amazing athlete. And the story, I wasn't there, but the story goes he was teaching at like a YMCA or something, or a community club, and a very high-level BJJ guy came in. He was teaching, the defense against a rear naked choke, standing rear naked choke, which it's a good defense, but the BJJ guy, of course, jumped on his back, put his hooks in, which then the defense doesn't work, and choked him out. And he's like, the Krav Maga instructor said, "Oh yeah, do it again." He broke the guy's nose, and they weren't allowed to teach there anymore. And it's a very, that story is just like very humbling. I always revert, like, don't let people get there, because if jiu-jitsu guys are like, oh, if they get your rear naked choke in, you're screwed. And I'm like, you're probably right. So I always take it from a strategic perspective. Why do you let someone get on your back? And just the technique's here, but really don't let that happen. Hearing stories like that, and a lot of Krav guys, they just have the ego, and they're like, no, my defense works all the time. I'm like, are you sure? Some of these guys are monsters.
Think about it.
Yeah.
I have two amazing stories about it from the old school Krav Maga era. Elia Vigzar, which was also, as I said before, he was a black belt in Judo, a Judo instructor. And he went and did some sparring or randori, I think it's called in Judo.
Yeah.
And Gadi Skornik, also a famous martial artist in Israel, and he was a high-ranked practitioner in Judo in the world. And he took Eli to the ground, tried to choke him out, and Eli beat off his arm.
Yeah.
Did a lot of damage.
Yeah.
And Imi was there, and he yelled at him, "Eli, what are you doing?" He said, "Sparring." And Eli said, "I thought Krav Maga sparring."
Yeah.
I apologize. But Imi did not understand, like the clue. And he took Eli with him to do sparring with some boxers in an Arab city near Netanya, an Arab city called Taibe. And Eli is explaining, he said, okay, we are coming over there, and the Israeli Arab champion is working there. And the Imi say, okay, now you will spar. And I was so scared that I kicked him in the nuts. And he fell down. And, and again, Imi told him, what are you doing? Sorry, no Krav Maga sparring.
You know, I did that once. I did Kyokushin karate for a little bit just to explore. I got more bruises from that, by the way, than Krav Maga ever gave me. And the instructor was like, 220 pounds, 6 foot Hungarian guy, old school, just going, and we're doing, full on Kyokushin sparring, bare knuckle, no punches to the head. And I'm 5'6". I can't do meters. Sorry, 5'6". 160 pounds. This guy's huge, and he's just going Kyokushin style nonstop. And he's just backing me into a corner, and just without thinking, I kicked him in the groin, and he was down. And I'm like, well, I guess Krav Maga works, because I just panicked. Like, I could not deal with that kind of power and that kind of size, which is, why we kicked the groin as an option. He's like, yeah, well, good thing I have kids. And he was totally fine about it. He had a good sport, but it just reinforced the, physics. I always tell people you can't cheat physics, but you can if you use biology, kick them in the nuts. Right? So that's the stories like this all over the place, I think.
I think, the problem with those stories is that sometimes people understand those stories as, okay, so we don't have to know how to position ourselves, how to create the angles, how to cut the distance, because we can just kick to the groin and poke him in the eye. So I think it's important for us to say that it will help kicking him in the nuts and poking him in the eye. But when we train, this is like the cherry, okay, on the cake. This is not the cake. If you want to be good, you have to learn how to position yourself, how to create the angles, how to roll from distance, and to create the range and the opportunity. Above all that, of course, you need to train on how to kick people to the vulnerable point using your hands, using your legs, and so on.
Yeah.
Don't forget it. Boxers are
for
not.
sure.
Yeah, those guys, those professional athletes are very dangerous. They know how to strike. It's very hard.
Yeah, we have a pretty good MMA scene going on where I live. So occasionally I can train with some of these, and they're animals. And I always, regardless of where I'm teaching or what I'm doing, I always ask, like, has anyone here in any style trained or sparred with a professional fighter? Because if you haven't, you have no idea what some of these guys can do to you.
I have to tell you a story about that, about my boxing teacher. I met my boxing teacher when I was the head of the Israeli Defense Forces Krav Maga section. He was also like an officer in a whole different aspect of the army, in the Air Force. And we start talking about it back then we had like phones in the offices, less use of the cellulars and so on. So we spoke and we spoke and we spoke. And when I met him, he told me, okay, now I want you to spar with my son. Do you remember the national Israeli champion that I mentioned, that trained with me? So this was him. And I started sparring, and he said, you can do whatever you want. Kick him in the balls, kick him in the face. He's a boxer. Do whatever you want. And that guy, although younger than me, I think in about 10 years younger than me, wow, it was hard. First of all, it was very hard for me to kick because he always cut the angle. And every time I tried to kick him, he found a spot to hit me. And then it was 3 minutes, a 3-minute round. And I'm a Krav Maga guy. I know 30 seconds round, very aggressive round. I don't know 3 minutes rounds. And in the end of the third round, I was, like a mess. And he did whatever he wanted. I tried to kick. I wasn't able to raise my legs. He always closed the distance, and he did whatever he wants. So for me, it was a good lesson. Respect. Be humble. The guy trained all his life, 6 hours a day. He knows his stuff. He's very dangerous.
Yeah, that's why you use Muay Thai. Just kick him in the leg.
I mean, Imi said, do what you can, but do it right. Know what you're doing. Okay? If it's a boxer, kick him in the legs. If it's a Muay Thai guy now, You need to maybe hit him in the groin, take something to hit him in the face. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard. We have Krav Maga. It's like very simple, but it's very hard. You have to know a lot of areas.
Yeah.
Because in the street, you maybe two opponents will arrive.
Yeah.
Maybe one of them will be a professional. You have to know everything enough in order to be able to overcome someone with knowledge in a certain era.
Yeah, for sure.
Not
Now,
that
one thing I want
simple.
to get on, because I think you said you have an hour, so like I can go forever, but it's up to your schedule. Sort of like the military aspect, because often people, they'll say, and it just drives me nuts. Like, hey, I was in the IDF. I know Krav Maga. Let me teach you. And I'm like, okay, where'd you serve? What unit? Did you do the instructor course? Were you at Midkanadam? Were you special forces? Like, what'd you do? And they'll say all sorts of stuff. Oh, I was in Golani. I was like, oh, cool. How many Krav Maga lessons did you do? Oh, this. I'm like, because I was in Givati and I did 10 and I did nothing. I didn't learn anything new that I didn't already know from before. So how good is your there's it's a bit of a myth, North Americans have, especially. Hey, I was in the IDF, I know Krav Maga. No, I learned to shoot in the army. That's what I learned. I didn't really learn Krav Maga in the infantry. So I found, like, I actually found that if a person was in the military but teaches civilian Krav Maga, they're going to be way better than the guy who just learned even the special force guys. I had a friend who I'm not sure what unit he was in. We don't know, because he got into Matkal, and he was actually upset because he wanted to be in Shell Dog, and he got a phone call 2 weeks later saying, "Hey, come over to this unit." He was somewhere in some intelligence unit. So I don't know what it could possibly be. If he got into Matkal and he went over here, and he used to tell me about his Krav Maga. 3 hours, 4 hours, kicking the crap out of. He came back to the kibbutz one time with no skin on his forearm. And so you think, like, oh, this is crazy good. And then he came to visit me once. And this is early in Vancouver, and this is early in the my school days, so my students weren't very developed. And I had him sparring against my lower level guys, and they kicked the crap out of him because his technical ability wasn't there at all. So maybe this is something you want to address, because I think it's really important for the world audience to understand that,
Well, I'll start by saying that even if you're in the best unit of the IDF and you have like do the van unit, they have a lot of Krav Maga. They're the one that they take the costume. They become like the Arab population, the Palestinian population.
It's Aaron Cohen wrote the book Brotherhood of Warriors on Duvdevan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good unit with a lot of Krav Maga. A lot of Krav Maga. Even those guys, they don't know Krav Maga. And why? Because if you take the Israeli army, how many Krav Maga events do you have per year? I mean, an event in which a soldier needed to use Krav Maga to overcome an enemy. You know what? Maybe we have like something like 500,000 soldiers in the army. And maybe we have 7 events a year that we have to use Krav Maga. How many events do we have in the army that a soldier needs to shoot? Per year, we're talking about thousands of events.
Yeah.
Thousands. So Krav Maga is just a tool to create a better soldier mentally. Almost no Krav Maga events, almost no Krav Maga, almost no events when the soldier needs Krav Maga to overcome an enemy in all Western armies, actually.
Yeah.
So even in the best units of the IDF, when they have a lot of events, most of them are using pistols and whatever I don't know, because in the Israeli army we don't have any special weapons, as you know.
Yeah.
So they use guns, grenades, pistols in order to overcome an enemy. They don't use their hands. They don't need to.
Yeah.
But if you look at the Israeli prison service, for example, statistically, we have 3 stabbing events a day.
Sounds like a prison.
Yeah, makes sense. And I'm only talking about the events that the prisoners try to stab the prison guards. not the events that prisoners are trying to stab each other.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
we have
that's
a lot
cool.
of knowledge over there.
Yeah.
And in the army, it's different. They don't need Krav Maga in a high level. And this is why maybe they'll do Krav Maga once a week, for a year, once a week in the best unit, twice a week.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll do it every day for a short period of time. But most of the army Krav Maga will create a better fighter mentally. He will be more aggressive, more determined, and he know how to overcome an enemy that try to overcome him. Because when you shoot, let's say, a target, a paper target, he will not
Mm.
shoot back. But when you try to punch someone and he's punching you back,
Yeah.
say, wow, I'm punching as hard as I can, but he's not falling down.
Yeah.
Mentally, it will help you understand that even if you shoot someone, he will not fall down. He will keep on shooting you and so on.
Mm.
So Krav Maga is just another tool to create a better fighter, a better warrior,
Yeah.
but not technically. As you
Yeah.
said, as you mentioned, most of the time we train on how to shoot, not
Yeah.
how to fight someone with our hands. That being said, the Army Krav Maga instructor courses are very good.
Yeah.
You have 5 weeks of course from morning to the late hours of the night, and you learn how to teach Krav Maga, and you learn Krav Maga, and you have like a senior course, and the senior instructor course is almost, I think, 12 weeks of
Mm.
Krav Maga. And if you go to the senior course, you most likely know your stuff even before you enroll the army, you join the army.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you want to be, I think this is the message. The Army Krav Maga is very good. It's very good in creating mental opportunities and mental abilities. But if you want the technical aspect of Krav Maga, the Army has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
It will not give you the technical abilities. Technical abilities are a whole different thing.
Yeah.
To take someone like your friend who did he was in special forces, to take him and to create a good fighter technically, it's very easy.
Mm.
Because mentally he has his stuff in, and physically he's very fit.
Oh, he
Very
was. Yeah, I've never seen a human like him before. He wasn't just another species. And
yeah.
you'd never
So
even think. You'd look at this guy, like geeky looking guy from America, decent looking. You wouldn't think anything of it. And the guy, he could put on more weight. I think he told me like he was obviously in a very specialized unit, whatever they did. Two guys memorize a 100-kilometer route. Each does half the map. 150 pounds on their back, and they would do it no problem. Just the two of them from sunrise to sunset, or sunset to sunrise. If I did that, I would die. I cannot do that.
yeah, special guys, really special abilities.
Yeah,
But for me, it's not the challenge to create a good technical fighter out of those guys. I
yeah,
want to create, as I said before, the soccer mom. I want to take
yeah,
a soccer mom and to create a good fighter, a
yeah.
person that can defend himself or
Mm,
his loved one. And to see someone that was, he came to a gym like floppy looking, very scared, and you see him as a black belt. You see a guy, not an athlete, but he knows his stuff. He knows how to stand, how to protect himself. You see him talking, with a lot of confidence and so on. And you see this guy, and you say, "Wow, I changed his life.
yeah,
Now his life looks different, not only in the self-defense aspect, but
yeah.
I'm sure that every aspect of his life is different now because he believed in himself."
Mm,
I think this is what basic Krav Maga does.
mm,
It creates a different person. This is our goal. A better person, a more confident person. And I think this is the goal even in sports. When you take boxing, for example, which is a profession I love, if you go to the right teacher, he will tell you, you will not be a boxer. You train in boxing like we train in Krav Maga.
mm,
You want to be a better person, to have more confidence, but you are not a material for the ring.
mm.
You don't want to be the world champion. Don't go to the ring. You can
Yeah,
learn it as like a, like a hobby. You don't
yeah,
have to make a profession out of it. So Krav Maga, this is what we do best. We take
yeah,
the average people, we give them tools, we create better people, and of course, if you take a professional, you give him all the aspects to how to protect themselves against the daily threats like knives, gun threats. how to handle like a conflict with body language, how to stand when you see the conflict coming towards you, and so on. Even though he knows how to protect himself against punches, kicks, wrestling, takedowns, and so on, he never spoke about how to stand and where to stand when two opponents are coming towards you, two
Mm.
possible opponents. One of them is with a stick, second one is with a stone. Things that we talk about in Krav Maga, we make people think, even though it's a very hard scenario, when you think right, maybe you will know, okay, I see a stone, I see a stick, I see the door. Now I know that
Mm.
I have to run
Yeah.
because I don't have a lot of odds to overcome those guys. I
Yeah.
need to create the distance and run away.
Yeah,
This is the
it's a
difference.
it's a hard thing to explain. Like some of my friends who are like athletes and they fight semi-professional, trying to explain that to them, like, yeah, sure, you can choke me out on the mat, no problem, but like, do you really understand what happens when you got three guys and a weapon? And they're always, yeah, of course. I'm like, no, you don't.
They don't. They really
Uh,
don't.
yeah,
Most of them don't want to know.
yeah,
Most of them, they say, wow, it's boring. It's boring. I don't know, that rubber gun and that rubber knife. I'm not interested in it. Imi, when he was a young kid at the age of 13, his father, Samuel Lichtenfeld, he was a detective. He
yeah,
was a homicide detective in the Bratislava police, I think.
yeah,
And he told Imi, I want to check some things on you. He taught self-defense to his detective. He said, Imi, come. I will stab you and you'll do the defense that I will teach you.
yeah,
And Imi told his father, stop. It's so boring to me. I want to train. I want to box. I want to wrestle. Stop with this. I'm not interested in these democratic ways of fighting. This is what he
yeah.
told his father. He said, I wasn't interested. And now, when he was interviewed by Eyal Yanilov,
Mm,
and Eyal asked him about his father, so he said, now, when I created Krav Maga, I feel bad that I did not discuss my own father about those stuff.
yeah.
Because back then, when I was an athlete, I wasn't interested in those stuff. It wasn't interesting for me.
The young guys are always like that, right?
Yeah, and when you grew up, you say, wow, okay, maybe I need to think about stuff different. You are much more calm. You think about others. You are very strong and you see someone that you love and he's not as strong as you. He will never be as strong as you. He's
Mm,
weak. He was
mm,
born weak, maybe with a weak mind,
mm.
but you want to give him the tools to protect himself. And he wants to learn, but he cannot be a boxer. He cannot be a wrestler. Then you need to adjust your tools to the average guy. And when
Yeah,
you do it systematically, you do it the Krav Maga way does it.
yeah. Now, do you have to go? Because there's one other thing I want to talk about. I just want to make sure you have time.
Yeah, it's okay. I have my time will run up when I will see my wife through the door doing, like
Okay, yeah. Just let me know. Yeah, the thing that is the firearms aspect of it, because often on the internet, people who don't know they want to learn the gun disarms, they want to learn how to shoot. Now, depending on what country you're in, learning to shoot can be a challenge sometimes. So a lot of instructors just don't bother, and then they go to teach firearms disarms, and they don't know how guns work. I've run into this a few times. I like to use for pistols airsoft pistols where the magazine comes out, and I've noticed sometimes I go with other instructors wherever they're trained. I know they don't know anything about guns because we'll do the gun disarm, and the magazine falls out in the middle of the disarm, and they stop and panic and look at it like I broke your toy, and I'm like, why are you stopping? And I just that firearms aspect, because to me, like Krav Maga, you have to be able to deal with as many possible situations, is an important aspect that it's a hard area to tackle. How do you think about that?
I think that this is actually not that important aspect of
Mm,
Krav Maga. In Israel, we almost won't have any violent situation when people will rob you holding a
yeah,
gun, but you will have situation that maybe a terrorist will point a gun at you and he will say, okay, come with me to here and there. But even we, even if we have it, if you count the amount of time that it really happened,
mm,
maybe I don't know in the whole country 10 times in 70 years.
Yeah.
It's not that common here. Maybe it's very common in different countries.
Yeah.
And when someone is pointing a gun at you, you are like in the edge of stuff. It's
Yeah.
important to teach it. It's
Yeah.
part of Krav Maga. But you need to understand that the physical aspect of it is not that hard. You know, when you train on it theoretically,
Mm.
exactly like, I don't know, a knife threat. Very
Yeah.
similar. In some points, a knife threat is more dangerous than a gun threat, for example.
Mm.
But when you teach someone how to shoot a gun, and in Israel, as you know, it's very easy because most of the guys here are going to the army. They
Yeah.
already shot a rifle,
Yeah.
and most of them go to security forces afterwards, and they shot a pistol.
Mm.
And the others, they have pistols, you know, like personal firearms and so on and so on. And it's important because we want the people to understand how a gun works. You don't want them to get scared when the guns fires
Yeah.
out the bullet, because it's
Yeah.
like, you know, you hit the boom and you can leave the gun. What the hell just happened here?
Yeah.
But as I mentioned before, it's less important to me.
Mm.
I feel that more importantly for me to build someone with a strong mind, and I use all the tools to create a strong mind, because most of them will not encounter a real life event.
Yeah.
So I try to give them the best tools for both aspects, to create a better person,
Mm.
but to give them the technical ability to overcome the common threat. And the firearms are part of that threat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's
But
yeah.
I don't put too much emphasis on it because I feel that we are like running from the main subjects, because you're most likely to encounter a punch, a kick, and a knife,
Yeah.
and of course a stick before you will need to address the firearms issues.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I teach the firearm stuff at the higher level. It's like you need to be able to fight first, because you'll see. I'm seeing a lot of people making fun of gun disarms on Instagram, where they're like, "Oh, you disarmed and now you're in heaven," and I think there's a misunderstanding about it. It's not the technique specifically. It's like you got to distract them, you got the timing, what's going on. Do you know how to use the firearm? And there's just so much more to it. If you can't do the basics, as you said, it's don't even try. And it depends. Can you read? How well are you reading? The person. Because I watched this video, unfortunately, where this guy is a hotel or something. This guy has a pistol over the thing. He's robbing her, and then he got all the money, and then she just sort of sat down and tried to look like that, and then he reached over the counter again and then shot her. And I was like, that is when gun disarms are useful. Also, it emphasizes this idea. It drives me nuts when people are like, if someone's trying to rob you, just do what they want. I'm like, maybe just do what they want. But here's an example where that was not an option, and she didn't read the situation, and unfortunately, she's not around anymore. And just debating about it all the time with people, it's like it's a tough topic.
You know, I totally agree with what you said, and it's important to understand, maybe to understand how stuff works here
Mm,
in Krav Maga in Israel. For me, for an example, when I was in the Israeli prison service, there was a guy, two prison guards that had to guard a prisoner in the hospital.
mm,
In that hospital, the prisoner got a hold of one of the pistols of the prison guard, and he just pointed out the pistol to his head, and the prison guard just got
yeah,
cold feet, did nothing, and
yeah,
that guy was convicted in murdering 3 people already.
mm,
He just ran away from the hospital, and he was caught something
yeah,
like a kilometer away. But they asked me, tell me, do we teach the prison guards how to handle firearms? And I said, of course not. I need more time. So they gave me the time, and of course they bought all of the dummies, the pistol dummies, and so on.
yeah,
And they said, okay, from this point on, you will teach prison guards how to handle firearms, how to handle a gun threat.
mm,
So this is how stuff works. If you find it inside the system, it means there was a need for it.
yeah,
Okay, it's not just let's teach something. Like I have a lot of criticism against all the original Krav Maga flying kicks,
yeah,
with a spin.
yeah,
I don't know why to teach it.
yeah,
So Of course, when I was young, they told me you do it to have better physical capabilities. But now I say, okay, I can teach multiple things that will create more physical capabilities and will be effective in a fight. Those kicks are bad in to create physical capabilities and so on.
Yeah.
So I think as Krav Maga teachers, we need to understand that what we teach has its effects on the student. And if we will not teach somebody something, it will have an effect. And if you will teach something, it will have an effect. Even if you are teaching a lot of high kicks, your student will use high kicks in a real life conflict for sure. How do I know? Because I used high kicks in a real life conflict and I did fell on my ass.
Yeah.
And when I asked myself, why the hell inside a prison, for example, did I use a high kick?
Yeah.
And we have oil on the floor. Why did I do it? And I said, because I used to it. And I
Yeah.
saw the opportunity and raised my leg and I fell down.
Yeah.
So you need every time you need to think about it. If I'm teaching how to handle gun threats, am I teaching it to the proper population? Maybe I'm creating something that I don't want to create.
Yeah.
Maybe that population doesn't need it. And sometimes you teach it because it's part of Krav Maga and it's okay. You want them
Yeah.
to maybe expand their horizons, but everything has its own effect on things.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting what you said kicks because, like, I don't have high kicks in my curriculum because I watched a few black belts of variety style do just that. They slipped and fall, and then it's I'm not teaching a middle-aged person walking in the door how to kick someone in the face. But then I see videos coming out of various in Israel organizations, and they're doing the high kick stuff, and I'm like, I don't know what to think about that because, like, hey, I'm watching the origins of Krav Maga, and I'm like, but that's not to me what I should be teaching, and I still see it. So it's good to hear that there are other people with the same mentality.
No, a lot of things. I think it's important to say this as well. A lot of things are really the original Krav Maga syllabus. There are a lot of things that you can see and you say, wow, this is not Krav Maga, but it is Krav Maga. It's just
Yeah.
the original syllabus because, in my point of view, it was not a complete view. Imi thought about things, people thought about things, but they didn't fully think about it.
Yeah.
Because things are revealing with time. When you practice with the, as a teacher, you practice a lot of things. And then with time you say, wow, I've been practicing it for, I don't know, 5 years now. And I see that the students, they are not reacting good to it. They're not becoming better at it. So maybe I shouldn't teach it. I should think about another way to teach it or something else to teach. The same thing happened in Krav Maga, but it took a lot of years and the people were no longer working together. So in some gyms, you can see a lot of high kicks and like kickboxing style. Other gyms, you can see a lot of boxing. And in other gyms, you can see a lot of groundwork. Everybody are IMI students. They train with IMI, they train with each other, but they teach Krav Maga a bit different in their own gyms.
Yeah.
Partly because what I mentioned, they just in some point took their own path. Some of them remained in the old Krav Maga path, some of them creating a whole different thing. So now Krav Maga is just a term that reflects a lot of styles, not just a certain style. But as I said, when I tried to do the forum in the Wingate College, I told the guys, they spoke a lot about the army and how important is the army for Krav Maga. And I told them, guys, you know what I learned in the army when I taught Krav Maga to Krav Maga instructors or would-be instructors that are already civilian instructors? That the Krav Maga guys, we have the same lingo. We do the same things. We speak with the same terms. The basic approach is the same. All we have to do is to find that basic approach. Upon it, Krav Maga was built. This is a challenge, actually. This is what I'm doing all the time. This is my, I don't know, my life mission currently, to find the DNA, the basic stone on which you can build all the styles on. And if you're keeping that stone, you're still doing Krav Maga. If not, maybe you should think about what you're doing because a lot of gyms around the world, sometimes even in Israel, of course, the term is Krav Maga. What you learn inside is something totally different. Totally different.
Yeah, I think the sort of the buzzword nowadays is first principles. Like, what's the first principle of Krav Maga? Like the basic concept that you can build off of. Uh, and I listened to, like, a lot of intellectuals or like Elon Musk or people like that, and that's how they think about everything they do. It's what's the simplest thing that will work for the most amount of things, and it'll solve the most problems. And I think that's the sign of, you're right. Like, that's a good Krav Maga program if you just sort of focus on that and work around it, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think we're about an hour and a half. I think it was a very productive conversation. I learned a lot, for sure. Is there anything you wanted to add in that we didn't talk about, or something I forgot that you think is important?
No. Maybe I would like just to say that I want to conclude our conversation about stuff that I said, because a lot of times when I speak about Krav Maga with people, they get the wrong impression that I say, no, guys, Krav Maga is not good. You have to take Krav Maga and to learn more things around it and so on. Very important for me to say again, Krav Maga is a whole system. Its aim is to give tools to become a better person and to survive a real life conflict. This is what we do. This is all we do. And I think when you are aiming for something, you are doing it quite well.
Yeah.
You can learn a lot of things. It will maybe help you in Krav Maga. It will make you a more deep Krav Maga practitioner or a teacher. But Krav Maga can be the source of everything you do.
Yeah. That's good. Wise words. If people want to train with you or contact you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Well, actually, through the social media, I'm very available through Facebook.
Yeah.
And I sent you the
Yeah.
address for my
I'll put those in
page.
the links. Just it's Israeli Krav Maga Institute on Facebook, and then Krav Maga History and Culture. It's I always love the photos and the stories on that one. That's why I asked you, because I see that photo coming up all of the time, and I know there's gaps in my knowledge, so it was very good. So thanks for coming on, Ron, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. And then I'm going to sleep now.
Thank you. Have a
Yeah,
good night. I'll go to the
absolutely.
beach.
Yeah, enjoy.
Thank you.
You're listening to The Warrior's Day. Brought to you by Urban Tactics Krav Maga, turning lambs into lions.